Hey guys, we're going to have a look a little at some Kant theory today, because if we look at some of Kant's metaphysics slash epistemology, we kind of understand some of the things that Nagel's been saying. And I think it's pretty reasonable to be saying that maybe Nagel has Kant in the back of his head when he's talking about, say, the limits of what the human mind can know, right? So we're going to explore some of Kant's metaphysics slash epistemology, because often they just completely overlap. And we're going to do that in order to explore some of Nagel's comments about the limits of human knowledge. Now, when we talk about knowledge, remember we're talking about epistemology. Epistemology is the study of knowing, whereas metaphysics is the study of what is real and reality. Now, for Kant, these two are intimately linked, and we can use some of Kant's ideas about phenomenology in order to understand or get deeper insight into what Nagel is actually trying to say. Okay, all right, so we're going to go back to our Year 11 theory where we looked at Kant pretty deeply. All right, remember we talked about his idea of freedom and moral freedom and stuff like that. We did have to know a little bit about his phenomenology, or his transcendental idealism, in order to get, or in order to understand some of that idea of what he was talking about when he's talking about freedom. Okay, then we're going to apply some of his theory to Nagel's arguments that were raised in the previous video, and we're going to explore what Nagel is saying when he talks about the limits of human understanding. So can you please write these three success criteria down, and then can you draw a picture that represents something that you cannot know? I want to know if you can actually do that. Is it possible to, in any way, represent something that you don't know? Or can you just draw the boundaries of it? Let's see. Alright, so when we talk about understanding, this guy here, remember Kant from Year 11, he was basically arguing that there are just some things about life, the universe, and everything, about reality, that are out of our reach. And he's saying that there are facts, there are things, there's the nature of what he calls the nominal world, which is completely outside human understanding. Because the nominal world, according to him, is the real world. Remember that? And it is the unknowable world from this point of view that I'm about to get into. So take a note if you don't remember what we were talking about last year. Just remember that Kant said that there were things that occur outside of human experience that are just completely unknowable to humans. And that's what we call the nominal world. Right. Now, a key way to understand what Kant was talking about was to understand that sense perception, from a Kantian point of view, is really nothing but random, meaningless inputted data that comes into our mind unless we apply already existing ideas to make that sense data make sense. And from a Kantian point of view, when we're not born with any other prior knowledge or any other forms, but an understanding of what he calls the categories, okay? And these categories, which can be divided into four, and then they have their own kind of subcategories, for want of a better phrase, they are applied to sense data and to experience to make sense of it, to make it intelligible, to make it meaningful for us. So, for instance, if we're observing one object, we may, without even thinking about it, already understand that it's a unity of other objects. It might exist as one object out of many, and it has some kind of overall essence. In other words, there's a unifying factor tying it together, or some kind of universal quality that it partakes in, i.e., see a girl, that girl partakes in the idea of girlness. Now, when our mind does all this work and does it in a structural way, Kant called these things conceptual schemas. Conceptual schemas are us performing all the hard work and applying the categories and other things as well, to our sense data and experience in order to make sense of it. So we don't necessarily have an understanding of the nominal world. Instead, we have an understanding of the world which is phenomenal, or mediated by the application of these preformed ideas to sense data and to experience. Take a note. And when we look at the combination or the application of our conceptual schemes or the categories to sense data and to experience, we then no longer have connection with the nominal world. We understand the phenomenal world, okay? So really, that's why we say human consciousness is phenomenal. It is immersed in a world of phenomena, but not nomina. Not things as they really are, but things that have been filtered by our preformed ideas about the way the world works and its application to sense data and experience, okay? So we have phenomenal experience. And Nagel said, I wonder if we look at our whole argument, are we implying, my argument doesn't directly say, but it might actually imply that facts are beyond what we can know because our schemes, our categories, sorry, and the mental schemas based on them, or the conceptual schemes based on them, they can't take into account, they just can't allow us to develop concepts or understandings that perhaps a bat could have or that an alien could have, because they may have been born with a different conceptual schema or a conceptual scheme. They may have been born with different categories, which allow them to form just different understandings of the nominal, or they might just have a direct access to the nominal. All right. So the fact is, our conceptual schemes or conceptual schemas just might not actually allow us to understand certain facts that maybe a bat can, or that an alien can, or maybe the bat's consciousness and what it's like to be conscious for a bat, and the alien's consciousness and what it's like to be an alien, or what it's like to be an alien conscious for an alien. It gets confusing, doesn't it? So he's saying, look, this idea, this fact that there are facts that are just out of our reach is a pretty fair conclusion, because our mind is structured in a way to not allow us to understand it. And he's saying, look, this isn't just an epistemological issue where we're talking about just not really being able to know what it's like to be a bat. We might be in a situation where we can't even form the concepts because we don't have the right conceptual schemes, or categories to actually allow us to form a concept that we need to understand what it's like for a bat to be a bat. Take a note. Okay, so let's do the reading of this paragraph and see what it's saying, okay? Hopefully it's saying exactly what I brought up. This brings us to the edge of a topic that requires much more discussion than I can give it here. In other words, I'm only going to give it one paragraph, namely the relationship between facts on the one hand and conceptual schemes or systems of representation on the other. So here he might also be talking a bit about structuralism and the way structures inform structural schemas, okay? It might not just be the kind of Kantian point of view. And I really do recommend you look up structuralism, because it can easily be applied to what he's saying, okay? My realism about the subjective domain in all its forms implies a belief in the existence of facts beyond the reach of human concepts. So what he's saying is the subjective domain of, say, a bat implies that perhaps there are facts that exist beyond what humans can grasp. Easy. Certainly, it is possible for a human being to believe that there are facts which human beings never will possess, for which human beings will never possess the requisite concepts to represent or comprehend. This is more of a Kantian point of view, because what he's saying is that the human mind is structured in a way to not allow us to comprehend it. It's born with these categories, these schemes. The way it is just doesn't allow us to understand the way something else is, or what something else is. Indeed, it would be foolish to doubt this, given the finiteness of humans' expectations. After all, there would have been a transfinite, never heard that word before, would have been transfinite numbers, even if everyone had been wiped out by the Black Death before Cantor discovered them. Okay, that's about something that we should go look up. A bit of a tangent there. But one might also believe that there are facts which could not ever be represented or comprehended by human beings, even if the species lasted forever. This is a reference to Kant's phenomenological theory, or what we call transcendental ideology, okay? Simply because our structure does not permit us to operate within the concepts of the requisite type. So there you go, we talk about structure that is about like that neo-Kantian idea that the mind is bought with categories and born with conceptual schemes that use the categories and other things in order to make sense of our experience, and it's just part of being a human being, which then alienates us from an understanding of other things in the nominal world. This impossibility might even be observed by other beings, but it is not clear that the existence of such beings or the possibility of their existence is a precondition of the significance of the hypothesis that there are humanly inaccessible facts. After all, the nature of beings which access to humanly inaccessible facts is presumably itself a human inaccessible fact. Okay, so the nature of these human beings, of the way these things that can actually access what we can't access, is not something that we can access. Makes sense? Reflection on what it is like to be a bat seems to lead us, therefore, to the conclusion that there are facts that do not consist in the truth of propositions expressible in human language. We can be compelled to recognize the existence of such facts without even being able to state or comprehend them. So what he's saying basically is that even though there are facts that are beyond our reach because of the way the human mind is structured, right, we can acknowledge that there are things that are beyond our reach. And that's all I need to leave. That's all I need to say. And then he moves on. Okay? So let's have a look, all right? Did we recap on some Year 11 theory? Yeah, we did when we were looking at phenomenology or transcendental idealism. If you want to know why it's called transcendental idealism, come and talk to me. I'll be able to give you a brief synopsis as to why, okay? We'll also apply this theory to some of Nagel's arguments. Yes, we did, to the bat, right? So I kind of mentioned structuralism. That's different. That's not the same thing as Hegel's idea of conceptual schemes, or conceptual schemas. And I really think what he's alluding to is Kant's conceptual schemes, okay? So just keep that in mind. That's what Nagel is really referring to. And of course, he uses the idea of schemes, our schemas or conceptual schemes, not being able to produce concepts that even allow us to understand what it is like to be a bat. Not even limiting, like we might be limited in terms of being able to take their first person subjective point of view, but perhaps even the way that our mind is structured might prevent us from forming concepts that we need to understand what it's like to be a bat, because we just can't grasp the nominal world in that way, okay? That's what we've been talking about, and that's how we explain the limits of our human understanding. All right, so could you draw something that you couldn't know? Probably not, because that is inaccessible. That was the whole idea of the APK. Cheers.